there's a little bit of difference. It's a charming picture. You can see the people on the veranda and the summer house. This is the house. This is the only house Asher Basford built, and I did tell you this before, so forgive me. This is the only house Asher Basford built that he did not design himself. This is the only house out of New Brunswick that was done by the New Brunswick architect Matthew Steed, and it it's really a gem. I explained more about it the last time, and I won't go through all that again. But what I will show you is here, and I told you before that this is the only house that was built in Calais that did not have a kitchen on the main floor. The kitchen and the servants' quarters were in the cellar. And even up until, they may still be there, the staircase at the bottom had bells telling you which room was ringing, so that if you wanted, if somebody in the room wanted to serve it. But in the 30s, probably, a man named Buber bought it, who was related to Mrs. Jewett. And then the Jewetts had it after that. If I don't know, I know people who are not from here. That doesn't really mean anything to them. Right now, it belongs to someone, but it's empty. But in the 30s or 40s, this carriage house was taken down. The wood and the windows were used to build an L in the back that houses the kitchen. So there is a kitchen there now, but it looks like it's always been there, primarily because they used the materials from the carriage house. But I really like this picture, so I wanted to throw it in. You can go to the next one. And well, I really don't know how big. It was a man named Alexander Gilmore who had the house built, and I don't know the size of this family. Of course, in those days, many families were larger than they are now, and there were extended families that lived in houses of this size. Now, this is, of course, the same house, but I just to sort of point out all this barge board carving, and is really wonderful, and the staircase, but it's really threatened at the moment because this pinnacle is gone, and this section is rotting down into the house. This chimney is gone. It would be architecturally, it would be a terrible loss, and so hopefully something good will happen to it. Yep, keep going. Now, I threw this one in because this I found some other pictures of the Yobsky house, and I did talk about this house the last time, but this is where the Yobsky family lived, and I mentioned there were just two families that lived in this house. This house was built in 1824, so it is 201 years old, and is, as I'm sure you all know, is where they are working on the apartments that have been added to it in the back. It's on Main Street, but it was a wonderful house. The interior features had inside shutters. There were 8 fireplaces. There was a huge kitchen fireplace with the oven, but I think it's just the shell that's left now. You can keep going. There's just 2 more pictures of it, just because I think they're rather charming pictures. And you can see, I don't know if you've noticed, but if you look at the house, you'll find, and it's been there as long as I can remember, there's a sort of arched pediment thing over the doorway, but you can see that it wasn't that way originally. Okay, yep. Now, this house, people who have lived here can probably tell me where this house was. It's gone. Does anyone, I don't mean to quiz you. Does anybody know? Somebody should. Peter Perkins, you should know.
Yes, right on the slide.
Oh, it tells you. Oh, well, forget it. Yes. Do I want to do what?
Turn the captions off.
Yeah,
Matter.
it doesn't, I guess it doesn't really matter. No, yes, this is the corner of North Street and Washington Street. And it was there, Gerald Bonus lived in one half and the Dotons lived in the other half at the end. And it was really a lovely house. There was nothing the matter with it, but it's what was purchased and torn down for the post office. Now, this is the house that belonged to William Woods. And, you know, I shouldn't tell you this, but you know, there are 89 more pictures up here, and we're never going to get through them. And especially when I used to do staff development for lots of teachers, and they used to say, you know, you have to get a hook to get rid of him because he keeps talking. William Woods had a store on Main Street where next to the bank on the corner of North Street. At one time, if you remember, it was Rutherford's jewelry store, and there's a little shop in there. I'm not sure what it is now, but it also had an entrance on North Street, so that it went up behind the bank in one of those buildings that's no longer there. You could go either way. The interesting thing about William Woods, we did his wife Mary Woods in the cemetery tour one year, and she had 9 children and only one survived. And one died with cancer and one died, you know, in infancy. And so the story was that she was really rather depressed and went down to the docks to drown herself. And she came across a child that was abandoned and was wanting to jump in the river herself. And she took her home, and that started a system of finding these children on the docks, because there were a lot of them. And then the Benevolent Society and Mary Woods worked to place these children and have them adopted in homes in town. So it's really an interesting story. But this is where she lived. Okay. Now I threw this in because it's an interesting picture, not so much for any particular house. But do you know where it is? Does anyone know where it is? Nope.
Canadian.
Nope.
No.
When I tell you, you might know, and maybe not. This is, let's see. This is probably taken just past Monroe Street, and right here would be the Dollar Tree. And this is the original Catholic Church, which was on Union Street. Well, last week we talked about, or last time we talked about the Mason House, the little old cape, and the law office, and that would have been right in here in this section. And this building may be the core for the thrift shop that's there now. I'm not sure of that, but it may have just been built up. But there were houses all along here, and when the Yobskys were developing all this, they would buy these houses, and the land would go back a long ways, which is how all this became, you know, developed into commercial things. But it's one of our oldest pictures, isn't it, Alan? Yeah. Now, this is the old hospital building, and I don't know if anybody remembers it. I remember it, but I don't remember it being open, but I do remember the building. It would be right next to the Baptist Church on Church Street, and it would be where the where the parking lot is for the city building. And it belonged, and then here in the back, when this is when it was a hospital. Here in the back, that was a nurse's residence. Now, in a minute, I'll show you another picture of it, and I don't know whether the old carriage house was turned into this nurse's residence, or whether it's a whole new building. But this house belonged to a man named McNichol, Archibald McNichol, and he was in Congress. He was a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1880. He had a daughter, Helen, and a daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth went to Boston and married a man named Robert Treat Paine. Robert Treat Paine was one of the signers of the Declaration for Massachusetts, and this was his direct descendant. But so this was the McNichol house. You can, and this is an older picture of it, and this is the city building, and this carriage house. I tend to think, that it may have been converted into that nurse's residence that's in the back. Okay. Now, this house you probably recognize. This is the house where Ralph Mercer lives. It was the Lowell house for a very long time, but it first belonged to a man named Samuel King. And Samuel King owned, of course, this property, but also all the way to the river. And his shipyard was behind this house. This is the only house you can see inside the interior shutters, like we have here. There was at one time there were 12 houses in town with these interior shutters. I don't think I know they don't all exist anymore, but this is the only house in Calais that has the shutters upstairs also. Every other house only has them on the ground floor and primarily in the double parlors. A man named Stanley Bowen lived here last. It was the Lowell house, and he married Louise Lowell. And that was probably in the 90s when he died. And it was one of those houses that survived with the furniture from the Lowell family that would go back into the 1800s. But it was all purchased by an antique dealer, and the shutters were in the basement and not on the house, and the antique dealer took those too. So, but yeah, okay. All right, now, this is that same house. This is the house where Ralph Mercer lives. I only am showing you this picture because this is the house that was next to the house where the Chadwicks live. And now it's a one-story bungalow, but that's the house that was there. It burned, I think, in the 40s, I think. And if you show me the next picture, that's the same house. And you can see Calais houses tend to be a collection of things. I mean, these returns are sort of Greek revival. This square bay window is really more Italianate. This tower tends to be almost Queen Anne. So they're kind of a collection. But we don't have a good picture of this house. And this is the Chadwick house. And I just mentioned it because it's an 1830s house. And it also was a Lowell house. It was built by the Lowells. And then later it was purchased by the Copelands. And at the turn of the century and into the 20th century, there was a man, Charles Townsend Copeland, who was a Harvard professor. And this is where he actually was born in a house in Lowell Street, but this is where he lived. And he would come to Calais in the summers. He was a very colorful character. At Harvard, he taught people like T.S. Eliot. They were in his literature classes. But he was very, very well known in Harvard. And in fact, I think didn't they record him? They did some videos of Copeland. He would have these group readings and things in his rooms. He was really well known. He wrote many books. the Maine State Library when he was still alive, did a collection, a section that was just all of Charlestown and Copeland's buildings. Then after the Copelands, it went to a Curran family, and their son, Ben Curran, used it as a tenement. And if you've ever been in, you might notice that the inside shutters I was talking about before with Ralph Mercer's house, they are in the room on the left, but not in the room on the right, because when it was a tenement house, they were taken off and burned for fuel. And the house was really dilapidated. And it had an L with a big central chimney and a cooking fireplace. But the fireplace was, the chimney was pulling the whole L off, and it wasn't saved. And Dr. Densmore, the dentist who was here for many years, he bought it and did the restoration work. They lived there for quite a long time. Okay. Now, this everybody knows, right? This is the Swan house. This is the Dr. Swan house. And the Swans built this house in the 1830s. The same family was the Swan-Horton house. The same family owned this house until the early 1970s, from the 1830s, and it had all the original furniture. It's a beautiful house. Dr. Swan, we mentioned in the cottage next door that was the home of the first 3 doctors. Dr. Swan was probably the 4th doctor, and he apprenticed with Dr. Holmes from this house. And Dr. Swan was the mayor for quite a while. This is a carriage house, which is no longer there. And it was a 2-story building. It was attached to the house. During the Depression, the family was told that if they tore it down, it would reduce their taxes. And they took $20 off of their taxes, and it was taken down. So it was sad. Dr. Swan was first married to Judge Downs, the Yobsky house. Judge Downs' daughter Mary. She died in childbirth, there were twins. The twins and Mary Downs died. I don't remember the order, but all as a result of childbirth. And then it was many, many years later when he married Minerva King Horton. She had married Ralph Horton, and that's how the Hortons and the Swans were connected. Swan Street used to be called Grosvenor Street, but it was named Swan Street purposely for Dr. Swan.
That's where that house is.
It's on Swan Street. It's yellow now, and it has had it. You have to bear with me. When it comes to particularly the outside architecture in these houses, I'm really a purist, and I don't like to see things altered. And the porch has been altered. It was taken off and widened, and the balustrade on the top, I can't seem to make this work very well. I guess it doesn't. The balustrade is that little railing on the top of the porch. That's been removed. The chimneys are gone. So it's had some alterations, but it's in very good shape. And I was talking to Jane the other day, and it is true. I've thought of this often. No, it's sometimes it's a matter of 2 choices. It is the house left in disrepair and lost, or is it altered and saved? So it's better to be altered and saved, but I just like them staying the way they're supposed to be. And this is the side, they removed this little front entryway. If you notice the pump, that was the last working pump in Calais when the last of the Hortons lived in the house. People who had Mrs. LaCroix in 4th grade, I did. Did you, Pam? Yep. And she was one of the Hortons. one of the Horton girls. Yep. This is the parlor of the Horton house in the 1890s. There had been a fire in the house, and some renovations were done as a result of it. I believe that this fretwork in the archway was probably added. There might have been, it's more likely that there'd be pocket doors, but I'm nearly not sure of that. I do know that at the time of the auction in the 70s, there were still rolls of this French wallpaper in the attic that were still there. This little chair, this little chair, I have in my house. So there were people that do have some of the things that were there, but it's just an interesting, very Victorian picture. It's a double parlor. There's a fireplace on the other end. It was a beautiful house. Now, this house is right across the street from it on Swan Street. This house was built by Dr. Swan and his wife for Mrs. Swan's son, Ralph Horton, when he got married. This was their wedding present. And so this house was purchased at that time. And this is where they lived. And the grandparents lived across the street until the First World War. And at that time, around the time of the First World War, there was the story goes from the family, was that there was a fox farm. In fact, there was one on the Canadian side, and I think there was one like on South Street. And it was a particularly cold winter. They invested heavily in the fox farm. And it was a very cold winter, and most of the fox did not survive, and they lost all of their money. And so this house was sold, and everybody moved across the street, and they lived there together for until the house was sold in the 70s. But yeah, and that's the same house, and it looks pretty much the same today on Swan Street. It's quite close to it. They always would tell stories of how the family wanted to keep up the image that they still had money when they didn't have any. And they would have dinner parties in the Swan house. And old Mrs. Horton would always insist and say to people, oh, please do have some more. And the story was that everyone in the family held their breath because they knew they had scraped every pot to provide the food that they'd already eaten, and there wasn't any more to go and get. But then Marion Horton was the youngest of the Horton girls, and there was only one boy, Tom, and Marion was also a teacher, but she went up to Holton to work, and she lived with Judge Madigan, and there she met a relative of his who was a man named Henry Cunningham, and he lived on Beacon Hill in Boston, and his father was the lawyer to the Archdiocese of Boston, and they lived on 43 Chestnut Street on the top of Beacon Hill. And he was quite a lot older than Marion, but she married him. And that money kept the house going for a very long time. And then Marion, in 1964, her husband had died. She went on a cruise, and she met a man from Michigan, and she married him. And they were married in the house, in the Swan house, at Thanksgiving. And she went to Michigan, and in January her appendix burst and she died. Okay, yeah, we probably better move. It's probably like, yeah. Yes, Peter. Yes, they did. The Cassidys lived in that. That's right. Well, Reed Jewett, Timmy Jewett's grandfather, lived there for a long time. And then I think the Cassidys bought it from him, Pete. Yeah. This house I only put in because this is the house that Grandmother Swan grew up in on Main Street. It's still there. It is, if you're going back towards downtown, it would be the house right after the radio station. Doesn't look as charming now as it did then. It's apartments, I think, and the windows have been shortened and that sort of thing. Okay. And this house I just threw in to see if anybody knows where it is. This is what used to be the Barlow House, and it is on the corner of Barker Street and Main Street, and that's the radio station beside it. And now it's an empty lot with a motel unit in the back. But that was the Barlow House. Now, this is the greenhouse. I think it's Elijah Green. It's Dr. Gould's house, and you can see next to it the house of Jane Todd. It's gone, but it's going on the right-hand side. I'm supposed to remember left and right because people can't see me point on this recording. Now, Mary Hayden Green grew up in this house, and she married, and you can go to the next picture. Okay, this is Frederick Augustus Pike and Mary Hayden Green Pike, and they were married. Frederick Augustus Pike's father was William Pike. He was one of the first settlers, and his brother was James Shepherd Pike, who owned the mansion house in Robbinston, and who put up the milestones that say 1 mile to Calais, 2 miles to Calais, 3 miles to Calais, and they go all the way down to Robbinston. And we mentioned this the last time, they also owned the double house where the library now stands that was moved to the avenue and has since been taken down. Frederick Augustus Pike was the Speaker of the House for the main house, and then he was in Congress, and he also was one of the people who was in the group that accompanied Abraham Lincoln's body back to Illinois when he died, when he was assassinated. Mary Hayden Green Pike was a well-known author, a nationally known author. And as a young girl, she had gone to the South, and she had seen slavery and been very affected by it. And she wrote a book called Ida May. And at the time, it was said to be as influential or more so than Uncle Tom's Cabin for the abolitionist movement. Its sense has been almost forgotten, but at the time it was very well known. She wrote many other things as well. Now we can go to the next one. Now this is the house where she wrote Ida May, and later it became the Keystone that belonged to Smitty Thomas, to Kenny's father, and it was apartments and a rooming house. Kenny, wasn't it? And you can see next to it where the motel now is. You can see on the left, you can see the carriage house and a part of that large Eaton house that I showed you the last time. But this house, of course, has been taken down. But this is where they lived, and this was an Asher Basford house like this. Okay. Now this is the other house that they owned. It was on the corner of South Street and Main Street, and it was called Thorncroft. And it later became a hotel, and sometime in the 40s it burned. But these were the two houses that they lived in, and that's a little later view of Thorncroft. But it was really an estate, and it was a beautiful house. It burnt before I was born. Now this is Jane Todd's house. This is the side of Jane Todd's house. And you can go to the next picture too. And that's also the side. This house belonged to John Preston. I think his name was John Preston. And we have an old picture of it that I can show you. But this house was also taken down. And now Kenny Thomas's new house is like just beyond that. It's in that section, right across from the park. One of the interesting things about this, Jane Todd had an ice cream parlor and lunch room up on the main street where there's a barber shop now, near Crumbs, before Crumbs. Oh, thanks. Does this work? Yeah, it does. It's before Crumbs, and she made chocolates. There were a lot of chocolate makers in Calais in the old days, and I remember Jane Todd's ice cream parlor from the 50s. But and she had a daughter, Betsy Higgins. Jane Todd was her maiden name. She actually was Jane Todd Higgins, but I don't think anybody ever referred to her as that. Her daughter, Betsy, went to Vassar. And she met there before the Second World War. She met a Filipino gentleman who was attending West Point. And he was a high-ranking officer in the Filipino army. And they were married and had a baby, a little girl, and went to the Philippines just before the Japanese captured the Philippines. And her husband was beheaded, and she was in a concentration camp throughout the war. And people who knew her, would say, well, if anybody is going to survive and come home, Betsy will come home, and she did. Then she went to New York again, and this time she married a man from Germany, and had 3 boys, the Burgermeister boys. Kippy was probably in your class, Pam. Yeah, Alfred and Kippy and Todd. And now Todd is dead. Kippy lives in the middle of the country somewhere. Alfred, I think, is in New Mexico or something like that. But Alfred does come. This is also a corner of that house, and this is the Boardman house on the corner. But this is the park. Okay, this is the old picture of the front of the house, and this is the Prescott, not Preston, John Prescott. And you can't really. There was a little sort of porch there and a gabled front. This house that's fine. This house I put in because I just think it's an interesting picture, and no one will guess where. Well, you might guess if you can tell what's up here, but I'll tell you where it is. This is, well, you can see. This is where the old Mary Baker Eddy a Christian Science a church was, and there is a church still there, right near the park, on the corner of Temperance Street and Germain Street. And see, this house is still there, right on Temperance Street, and it burned, but I just think it's a neat picture. And this house was there is a new house on this lot. This is a Queen Anne Victorian with the tower, the porch. This was help me, Alan. What's his name? You remember? Yep, that's right. Yeah, Hazen Elliott. Yeah, the Elliots. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's right there. Here I'm asking for help, and it's right in front of me. Yeah, and it was Hazen Elliott, I think, at the end. And then the Jackson boy had it, and it burned. Mike Johnson. Oh, Mike Johnson had it too? Yeah. Who had it when it burned? Mike Johnson? Yeah. And now there's a new house there. This is the corner of Swan Street. This would be Swan Street right here. But you can see, as I think I said before, if you can visualize all of these grand houses in the spots where something less grand stands, you can tell that the main street was, was really a gorgeous residential area from beginning to end. And that's the same house. Yep, you can go. Now, I threw this one in. It won't probably be a house anybody would know. It's in my neighborhood, but this is Monroe Street going right down here in front of this house. And this was a Gillespie house. And now on this corner of High Street and Monroe Street, for the last 50 or 60 years, oh, more than that, there's a one-story bungalow, rather nondescript, but this house burned. The bungalow was built on the foundation of this house, but this was a very large house with a big L and a barn. And it burned in the early 50s, but we found that picture in. What's happened? Are we running out of time? Okay, you can go on. Now, this is the Silverstone house. Mr. Silverstone, I believe, started the Calais City Band. Calais was quite musical for a long time, and the Calais City Band had begun as a Civil War band. And then later, there was something called the Calais City Band for many, many years. Now, this is the corner of Church Street and Washington Street. So Jack and Janet, this would have been 2 doors down from your house. And here is the old Congregational Church with a 135-foot steeple. And this is the house that was taken down. It was the Beckett house, and it was taken down when they built the new Catholic Church. That's on lower on Church Street. But this was a fire at the Silverstone house. Where did she go? That's all right. No, this is like a French Empire house with a mansard roof and the dormers, and this is the front of it burning. This is the old grammar school, the one that Asher Basford's son built. He built 2 of them, and they were identical. One was on Church Street where the brick apartment building is now. The other was in Milltown on the top of School Street. Yep, you can switch. And this is the Silverstone house. This was another part of town, Washington Street, and where the school is, and on both sides of the street were some very grand houses. I often say it seems like whenever they wanted to build something in Calais, they went to the very best neighborhood and tore it down. And this is where the old IGA building is now, and where you go for the motor vehicles building. And here you can see this house is still there. That's an apartment house. And this house, all the rest of these houses are still there. That's the old grammar school. These houses were taken down for the high school, the old high school. And you can see by the dress that, this is in the, I would say it's still in the end of the 1800s, the 19th century. And this just shows what was built. These were taken down. There's the steeple for the old Catholic Church and the parochial school. Yep. Now this house, you probably recognize this. It's been had some things removed, but does it look familiar to anybody? Oh, this is John Mitchell's old law office on Main Street. that now one of the Burns girls lives in. And the porch was taken off. But other than that, you know, it's pretty much the same. Now, this is the Boardman house, and Pam used to live there. And this is also a Second Empire with the mansard roof. George Boardman was a well-known ornithologist, and one of the things he did, he also wrote books about ornithology. And one of the things he did was he had a very, very extensive collection of birds. And I think it was considered at the time one of the most complete. And he wanted to donate it to the city, and they wouldn't take it. And so it now is in the New Brunswick Museum. And it has a whole floor, I think, in St. John at the New Brunswick Museum. And you can see over here, we'll look at this in a minute, but that's the birdhouse, I believe. No, and there's the carriage house, which has been gone for some time. Recently, you can see all these imbricated shingles, and under the shutters are you know, very intricately carved side pieces. But just recently, that's all been stripped away, sadly, and so it's really too bad because it was really recreated, wasn't it, Pam?
Yeah.
Tom recreated it from pictures, and but anyway, that's gone.
What street is it on?
That's on Lafayette Street. That is it's for sale now. It's just up from Kenny. Do you know where where Kenny Thomas lives in that new house? It's the next one. It's green. Yep. Okay. This is George Boardman. He is not buried in the Cal Cemetery. He's over in St. Stephen. This is the birdhouse, which he built as a museum for his collection. And if you keep going, this is the interior. And you know, he had all of these showcases built with all the various birds. And this is only a part of it. You can keep going. Here are more. This is the upper level. There was sort of a atrium up above. This house, that's all right. This house I put in because this is another Boardman house, but this house I'm pretty certain was at the bottom of Monroe Street. And I said Lowell Street and Monroe Street up to High Street had some very lovely houses. And this was one of them. This would be just about where the back of Marden's store is. Now, this house was, and I do remember it, it was in the parking lot across from the post office, which is behind the back of the bank and the, you know, those commercial buildings. But that was, in the end, it had apartments in it. Dickie Barnard's grandmother, May Wright, lived in an apartment there at one time. There was a man, Mr. Drapeau, who taught at the high school and as a young man, and he lived there. But and it was a very, you know, it's a charming little cottage, but long gone, of course. So yeah. Now we have pictures of this from various places. At this point, it was the Acadian Hotel. It started out as the home of Ephraim Gates, and E.C. Gates. His sister Lucy, I believe, married a man named Giles Wentworth, and Gates and Wentworth had a very large lumber and shipping business. Mr. Wentworth lived on Bering Street in Milltown. I don't have a picture of it, but the house that Marlene Parks lives in now, if you know where that is. That was the Wentworth house. And Mr. Gates had a daughter, Lucy, also, who married Henry Barnard and went to New York. I think, wasn't he murdered or something? There was something about a murder. I've forgotten now. So I shouldn't mention it because I'm not quite clear about it, but there was in New York. And this was one of the very first houses to have running water in Calais. And later it became, you can switch it, later it became the Mecca, the old Mecca Hotel that was there for a long time. And then it became the Port Side. It was a little notorious, but now this you recognize this corner where this is? Anybody? You know where that is? Okay, this building on the left is still standing. This is painted green and it's for sale. This will take you to the parking lot for the city building. There's St. Anne's Church, and this is E.C. Gates' house. And the bank has not been built, so this would be North Street. And you can see the horse and carriage. This is another very old, one of our old pictures, but yes, they would be. These would be wooden sidewalks. You can see all the fencing and gates. Yeah. Yep, and you can see this is a very old house, and this arched doorway with the fan light. And that's really all still there, but of course the house is not in very good condition now. Okay. And here it is again. This is before it became, there's a horse over here and this large barn. This is before, this would be when Mr. Gates owned it probably. It would be before it ever became a hotel of any kind. That's on North Street, of course. Now, this is where the park is. And this was a Federalist house. It belonged to Deacon Samuel Kelly, who owned a lot of land, and he owned the entire block that holds Memorial Park. And it was given to the city, and for a while, and I do have articles from the Advertiser from the 1890s, for a while, this was just used for city functions, teas and gatherings and so forth. And this house remained. Then they built the Civil War monument, and still the house was there. They left it, but there was a fire, I believe, and that's what happened to that house. It was brick. It was a brick Federalist house, and the wall, this granite wall, went all the way around the park. And this is the Boardman house up on the corner of Lafayette Street and Peace Street. During the Depression, I think, they took this wall down, and they took all this granite and they built the granite steps that go from the river up to the customs house. And that's where the granite came from that fence, that gate, that wall. And this shows, this is after the Civil War monument has been put up, but the house is still standing. It was a very grand house. And this is probably, my guess would be this is the dedication of the monument. Now, this house had a little different appearance when it was still standing, and I think it had a raised roof, an eyebrow window up here. But a little while ago, when I showed you Thorncroft, that was on the corner of South and Main, that belonged to the Pikes. This is the Rideout house on that same lot. This would be on the corner of Barker Street and Main Street, and it sat up on the hill. It was a beautiful house, and it was taken down to build the motor inn. Now, This is Samuel Rideout. He's the person who built that house. There were still Rideouts, for a long time. Samuel Rideout had a brother, Norman Dunning Rideout, who went to California and who began a bank that became the Bank of America. So it was his brother, Norman Rideout, who started the Bank of America. This is his son, Norman Dunning Rideout, who also went to California and worked with his uncle, the Bank of America. He and his wife were returned to Calais and are buried at the top of the center road in the cemetery. But it was that the house belonged to his father. Yep. This is Samuel Rideout and his wife. Samuel Weber, Dr. Weber, I don't know if anybody remembers Dr. Weber. Dr. Weber was a very well-known physician here in town. Well, Samuel Weber, his mother was this fellow's sister, and he was named for his grandfather, Samuel Rideout. This is Henry Milner Rideout. Henry Milner Rideout went to Harvard. He is another person who at the turn of the century was a nationally known author who wrote many, many books. One of them is called The Siamese Cat, but there are lots of them. He taught at Harvard for quite a while, didn't really like it, traveled in the East, in the Far East, quite a lot. And in fact, at other meetings, I have several letters that he wrote back to Mrs. Swan at the Swan House. And they're very interesting letters, and I've read them at other meetings. But Henry Milner Rideout died in an ocean crossing from China and was buried at sea. Now, I threw this one in too to see if anybody can recognize it. It's still standing, but it's been altered quite a lot. Anybody? No. It's where Barbara Thornton lives. Barbara Preston, Barbara's School of the Dance on Calais Avenue. It has all the things lit up at Christmas. And yep, that's it. It's the old Ross house. And it was Frank Fenderson's. Yep, for a long time. Frank Fenderson lived there a long time. But it's been altered. The bay window's gone and the porch is gone, and it's had alteration, so it doesn't look just like that.
You got about 5 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. This I like this picture. This you can see. This is St. Anne's Church. And here, one of the reasons I put this in. Now, this is the house that's still next door to St. Anne's Church. This is the funeral parlor. This house was taken down in more recent years, and it's where the funeral parlor has a parking lot across from the church. This house with a large mansard roof is a Murchie house. This is a carriage house, and it had a huge bay window that came out towards the church. It was a beautiful house, a lovely, lovely rooms. It was really a nice house. In the end, no one lived in it. You can go to the next picture too, because this is the other side of that house, and the church would be just beyond it. So, and the school would be opposite. This is the house you were talking about, Polly. Yeah. Okay, I put this in because it's just an interesting shot of Church Street. This is what was the old Congregational Church. And when the vestry underneath it burned, they moved it over here, and it was Pike's Opera House. This would be right behind the Opera House. This would be, the block, the Palladian block that is still there. This would be the brick Baptist church that burnt. This would be the hospital, and this would be the school up at the top. Yep. Now, this is the Opera House, which now is kind of a box-like brick building on the corner of Church Street. And the windows, you can see if you look, are all bricked in. And on the bottom floor there, they started to do a brewery or something of that sort. And and then this house was called the Border View, and it was a rooming house at the end. It was a McLeod house. And then in the back, there were some livery stables and things of that sort. But I remember this house. And then right here would be what used to be, for those of us who have been here a long time, Lois Campbell's, yeah, luncheonette. Yeah. This is the William Hines house. And it makes me think of, I spent a lot of time in the Connecticut River Valley and between New Hampshire and Vermont. And they often have houses with these pitched roofs and these shutters above the windows. This is where the Wickachee is now, where the old Wickachee restaurant is. But it was the William Hines house. William Hines was interesting. He built, he was a shipbuilder, and he's the gentleman that built a ship called the, well, I won't try to remember because I can't think of it now. But it was a very, very large vessel. And he became very upset by it because it changed hands and became called the Caribbean, and it was a slave ship. And in one voyage that we know about in 1852, they transported 1,200 slaves from Africa. And it was said that the profit from that shipment was $1.2 million in 1852. And William Hines was sort of, I don't know, it seemed from what we read, he was trying to live beyond that and not have blame for it because he had built this very large vessel. Okay, keep going. And that's the same house. And there's the old Wickachee, and there's the Keystone. Okay, I threw this one in because you know where it is, but it doesn't look like that now. It's what was the Townhouse Restaurant. Now it's Fitzgerald's Tavern or something. But when it was the Good House, it did look pretty much like that, except in my recollection, when the Goods lived there, this porch had been glassed in. But other than that, it was pretty much Joanna Good, and they lived on this side, and I think her grandmother lived in the other part of the house. And the Catholic Church. This is one of those old pictures. And you can see here the old rectory. And, or else, no, you know something? That's not the rectory. The rectory is sort of hidden in the back. But it's probably maybe before the rectory had the extra floor put on it. But it's just, it's right, it's right across, it's right across. This house is still there, and it's a work, it's like a shelter. It's not a sheltered work, it's a group home. Yeah, thank you. I added this. This is where where Gail Wall lived. This is the Thomas Hill house, and it was built in the 1820s. It's another house with interior shutters. It has siding on it now, but you can kind of see here there were fluted pilasters with the capitals on the top, and this was a barge board front. There were 8 fireplaces, and the story was that the marble, Thomas Hill was a sea captain, and that he brought things back when he was building this house, like the marble he brought from Italy, and there was a chandelier that was supposedly he had brought from Paris. Okay, I think we're going to make it. I know I'm going, well, this is also right here is where the Dollar Tree is. But for people like me, when I see that picture, it looks almost like if we drove down Main Street, we'd still see it. Because here is the General Whiddon house. General Whiddon was a colorful character who made himself a general. He never was one. I don't think he, but he made himself a general. And the last person, and Stanley Knowlton, who was another colorful character, lived in that house. And then this house was only taken down. This was the Barnard house, and it was only taken down you know, when they built the Dollar Tree, not that many years ago. Okay. This is the parade showing, this is St. Anne's Church. It's just sort of a charming old picture. And that's the house. Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. Yeah. This is the old Beckett house that was taken down when they built the new Catholic Church. And this shows, this is Calais Academy. This would be where the 1923 gymnasium is, where the recreation department is. This would be the old school. This would be the Catholic school. This would be the Silverstone house that we talked about. And I would say, Janet and Jack, your house hasn't been built yet in this picture. This is Louis Bernardini's and the house just above it. And Mrs. Jackman's old house, that's another one of yours, Pam, right there. Yep, okay. This is the old nurse's residence, and here's the Congregational Church. It is where on Church Street, across from the city building on the corner where the eye doctor's office is. And it was an apartment house in the end, and it burned. And I think we have an old picture of that too. Yeah, that's an older picture of it. And the barn is still there. That barn is still there. But you can see, to me, when you see these old pictures, you know, they're really charming and everything looks, you know, so lovely. Yep, you keep going. This is the main street. This was the Bank of Nova Scotia. This is the Merrill Trust, or the bank building, the Sarsaparilla building. Yeah, it's recognizable. Yep, keep going. We're almost at the end. The old Catholic Church, the old Beckett house, the Stone house. And then all of this is down by the waterfront. This would be Main Street from Union Street to the bridge.
That's where Hardwick is.
Yep, that's right. There'd be this. Here's the beginning of the bridge when it was a covered bridge. Hardwick's would be like right in here. The post office, yeah, and the back of the old church. Yep, you can keep going. Now, this stood on Monroe Street, where there used to be Hills Bowling Alley, and then Nellie Gibson had a antique shop in it, and now it's sort of abandoned. But and this would be where the Boston Shoe Store block is. So it's long before that. This was called the International Hotel. Yep, and that shows it from Main Street. This was Main Street. This was the Bank of Nova Scotia, and various other things right up to the corner of Monroe Street. So it was all very different. The old Congregational Church, which burned in the 90s, and the old Catholic Church, which I thought was a beautiful building that I always felt sadly that they didn't do something different with it and make it, you know, repurpose it or something, because it was a charming architectural style. This is Church Street, and this is before the city building was built. And so I think it is anyway. I think it is. Yeah, yeah. But this would be the Advertiser building and the earliest Baptist church before the brick one. This would be that nurse's residence. This would be where the Oddfellow, the Knights of Columbus building is. This is St. Anne's Church. Yep. Okay. And this is the bottom of Church Street. The Opera House, what was the old Congregational Church that stood right in the middle of Calais Avenue. And when it burned, the bottom of it burned, they brought this part over and made it into Pike's Opera House. That's building the post office. And the old Baptist church, not the oldest one, not the one that we saw in the last picture, a couple of pictures ago, but the previous one to the one that's there now. And this is the advertiser building. Yep, that's okay. No. And this is where the post office ended up being. This is when they were really beginning to excavate for it. And this would be Main Street. Here's the Boston Shoe Store, and Monroe Street would go right up there. And this again, this is Main Street, where the old bank building is on the corner of North Street. This is the old bottling plant building that was in the parking lot across from the post office. This is what was the Gates house that was later the Mecca Hotel, and the rest is a little fuzzy, but this would be the house that was taken down for the post office. I'm losing my voice. And this is the old stone house on Union Street, built in the 1820s. And you can see that there was a house right next door, right on top of it, which is no longer there. Yeah, you can keep going. This is this is Union Street. This will go down Hog Alley, and this would go up Union Street. So this was known as Brown's Corner. Yep, you can keep going quick. That's the old Baptist church before the brick one. It burned, yep. This is also Brown's Corner, just a little different view. But it was all quite different than it is now, of course. And I think this is the last picture. This house is still standing. Well, it's not one that you probably noticed, but Martha Robb lives in it. Ronna Robb lived in it. It's the old Buell house, Mrs. Polly's, on the corner of Monroe Street and High Street. But and I just put that in, and that's the end, isn't it? It is. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you. But now you can all wake up.